Why, hello, hi, it is me, it is I, small town Diddy, you're Heidi on the internet, and I'm back, we're back. You guys, down here for a chat because of some things that trended. Well, the one thing didn't trend. I just saved it a couple of weeks ago because I really wanted to come down here when I get the time to have a chat with you all. And the other is the thing that's happening with Eboni K. Williams and Iyanla Vanzant. I hope I'm saying her name correctly. We know who Iyanla is, I would think. She had the Fix My Life show. She's like the lady that does the whole, get your life together, like psycho and whatever. Eboni K. Williams is a TV host. She's an attorney, I believe. But I'm familiar with her from the Real Housewives of New York, the last season and the only season of Roni that she was on, and people, it doesn't matter. What's my chat today? We need to love our mothers. We need to love the older women. We need to listen to the women that came before us, but we must do so with caution and a pinch of fucking salt. We must take the things that are going to work for us, the things that apply to where we are, to the year that we're living in, and discard of the stuff that we don't need. We do not need to be disrespectful about how we choose to digest or take on their advice, but we cannot just take things on because they came before us. Our mothers are patriarchy princesses. They don't know how to be anything else. Very few of them have worked through unpacking how patriarchy harms them. Very few. And some of them have, but only to this degree, because they must still have a man or uphold the image of a man. We have here a wonderful actress. I forget her name, but I'm going to play a clip. It's 7 minutes long. I'm not going to play the whole thing, and then we'll come back and have a chat about it.
But you got to understand also, Buti, that singamaXhosa. Indoda yomXhosa. Inkwenkwe inyuka intaba.
Yeah. And
indoda
comes back.
Yehla intaba. And once indoda yehlile intaba, as much as you continue to be his mother, but indoda ngoku, I may not hit him again.
Because now you're not hitting the boy. You're hitting the man.
I'm hitting a man. And that's something that singamaXhosa, we don't take very lightly. I remember having an interview with, can I mention a name? Aubrey on 702.
Yes, it's from my township.
Yes, I have a lot of respect for him. And up until that moment, I thought he and I were good friends. When that movie inxeba came out,
I remember.
I was so offended. Now keep in mind, I was also a judge at the SAFTA, so I needed to judge this movie, and I could not watch it.
Did you ever get to watch it?
No.
Ooh.
I started to. I went into the theater, and when they started, I could feel, even as I'm discussing it now, my spirit is wounded. And I said, no, I can't. And I said, you know what? I will abstain.
Yeah.
I will abstain from the jury, from judging this one. Let me not. And they could not understand because there were white people involved, there were other cultures. And I said, but as a Xhosa woman, I can't.
Yeah, this is my world.
No, besides that. And this is what I was trying to explain to Aubrey.
Yeah.
He says, but, they're keeping women, it's an oppression, they're keeping women. And I said, no, you need to understand this. As a Xhosa woman, I have agreed to not know. But you should know, it's your child. I said, no, Buti. I agreed to not know. And you need to respect that. You need to I'm not ignorant of what goes on in there. I choose not to know.
That's true.
If I chose to know, I would find out.
Yeah.
But I choose to not know. To such an extent, and Vangile was also taught to not discuss that with me.
So he hasn't done it, obviously.
He's never discussed it with me. I've never asked him about it. And that began a chapter of him having his own life and his own, not necessarily secrets, but his own turf and his own terrain.
Yeah. So there is the respect of this man, so to speak, runs deeper than just a little boy in your household. You have to respect the entire value chain that brings up this man. That it's a patriarchal society that you were born into, and you will respect it for what it is.
Do you remember when we were talking about Sean and I was saying to you that she used to hold the pedestal for her man?
Yeah.
Most women do that. Now, take a
Absolutely.
Xhosa woman. When your son goes up the mountain, everything that child eats is cooked by you.
In that trip, so to speak.
No, Putin, not the trip.
Yeah.
The duration of the
Of the
time,
time
that
they're there.
Yes.
Ah,
Unxityiswa nguwe. Everything he's wearing there,
it's all you.
you prepared. Every meal that he eats while he's there, you have prepared. When he comes down that mountain, the blanket that he's wearing, you bought.
Yes.
And when...
Now, this lovely lady, I believe her name is Nambitha, gorgeous woman, talented, phenomenal. I loved Interrogation Room. Fucking old, right? Has been on our screens for so long. And I feel like sometimes when we see people on our screens for so long, and even their aesthetic, right? She's had this natural hair for as long as we can remember now. We want to attach certain things to them. For instance, you would not think she's a patriarchy princess. You just wouldn't. Now, before you get in your feelings and start to like scream about how I don't get it, I'm not Xhosa, I'm not Kimulovedu, I'm very much from the north. In a few of my videos, I've brought this up where I feel like because capitalism is so pervasive and it's found our way into our cultural practices, but we don't want to have those conversations. They make us uneasy and nervous. I feel they make us feel like we doubt the seriousness of our practices and our beliefs and stuff. We tend to be dishonest about a lot of things, right? We have a similar practice in my culture where the boys also go to the mountains, and when they come back, they essentially are men now. My issue with this in my culture that I've said, I think I spoke about this on the video I did of Gogo Maweni, and just like, you know, how we've monetized our culture and things of that nature. And I think I spoke about it when I was talking about the initiation school things as well, the people about Utasa. And nobody wants to have the conversation of how it's driven by capitalism now. It's really a money-making scheme. And in those videos, I made the point to say what's bothersome in my culture, this practice of, you know, boys going from like transitioning from boyhood into manhood, is that they often go there very young. And the people don't turn them away because they're looking at how much money they're gonna make, right? So with the Xhosa people, from what I've observed from a distance, is that they are usually at a good age. Most people go after matric, I believe, before they go to their first year, but they go at about 18, round about there. So that makes more sense to me. That part of the practice in that culture seems to be running as it should, which is not the same for my culture. That said, I am very confused about how, why is my battery doing this to me? I'm very confused as to how we can talk about the quality of men we have in society, and at the same time, when young men come of age, we release them to these same men to teach them about manhood, and then we think it makes sense because we're saying it's so poetic. I fear what's happened with us is that because they came here, right, with all their rubbish, and they got here and decided that we're barbaric and certain things that we do need to come to an end, this, that, and the other. It's left us in a position where we hold on so tightly to practices that no longer make sense. And it isn't the practice in its entirety that isn't making sense to me. Well, really it is. Because if we're going to talk about the quality of men we have in society as large being less than desirable, we ought to question the machine churning out the men. Surely. It cannot be this blind faith thing. And I know we want to hold on to our practices and our culture, but culture is not fixed, right? When you make it fixed and you make it rigid, it's speaks of a time, it's usually addressing something, and we keep some parts and other parts evolve as we do as people. This desperate need to hold on to something because we say that's the way it's always been done, even though it's churning out less than desirable results and we're not seeing the fruits of this thing, but we're holding on because I'm a Xhosa woman, I'm a Mlobedi woman, and this is my culture and I will uphold it. To what end? To whose fucking benefit? How are we winning? How are you at the exact same time saying you clothe this young man, right? He's still heavily reliant on you, but that's a man. And then you're also at the same time confused as to how the men in society perform so poorly but want to be upheld. Where are you confused exactly? Our practices are dated. They're archaic and they're incompatible with where we're going and where we are. And the whole thing doesn't need to get thrown away. But I don't understand what they're learning there. And protecting the practice out of I'm a Xhosa, like that's it? That's the extent of it? That's your entire argument is that I'm upholding it because that's it? That's supposed to be a good enough reason? That's making sense to you. I said in a video recently that I had a chat with a friend of mine who said she's so scared of having a boy child because she feels she's ill-equipped to raise one. And we had to work through that. And we realized that she's not ill-equipped to raise a productive, considerate, caring, member of society who happens to have a certain kind of genitalia. No. That's not what, she's not capable. She's scared that after doing all of that, the men of the world, society at large, is going to grip its claws into her son, and turn him into this thing, into this monster, really, which is what often happens. You can do the best that you can, and then you are expected to release your precious cargo into the care of this very same men you don't rate. But you protect the practice as a whole because you're a cultural woman. What the fuck are you even saying? What the fuck are you actually saying? How does this benefit you? How does this even benefit your son? How are we bestowing titles that have not been earned and then shocked when the men never amount to anything, when they don't rise to their potential, when they never meet us where we are because we chose to give them titles they have not earned? How the fuck is he a man? How does he go away? You clothe him, you feed him when he's there. He then goes to make the point, the interviewer, but what is your thinking around, the deaths that happen in the initiation schools across all the different cultures and tribes and stuff? And she says, where were the women? Bitch, what? Not her, bitch. Just an expression, sorry. But like, what are you saying? Is this not like a space for the men to teach the men how to... What do you mean, where were the women? Like, what is she saying? How do grown women get to talk so fucking crazy? What rubbish? What is she talking about? Like, what? I'm listening to her. I'm like, being a patriarchy princess is gymnastics. So anyway, I'm recording on a different device now, so sorry about the change in quality, okay? I feel she was doing too much to defend her position. I think she could have made her choice, her point, her main point was that she doesn't feel she's oppressed. And people are trying to sell her on this narrative that as a Xhosa woman, she ought to feel oppressed because she isn't being involved in this practice, right? And she's the one who births this boy, and then she's then excluded out of his journey into manhood and everything. I'm not necessarily sure. Excluded, yes. Oppressed to a degree. I understand why people would use that word in particular, that's not really my chat. My chat is protecting practices without real cause or reason, and your whole reason is just that so I'm just gonna like protect whatever thing that we do in my tribe without questioning if it's compatible with my core values outside of the things that have been prescribed to me, that you're born and they're like, oh, you're part of this tribe, these are the things we do here. Not those things, the things that you come into on your own. You decide, I'm a feminist, and you decide these are the tenets, and this is what I subscribe to. Not questioning culture and practices and rites of passage and things of that nature simply because it's unpopular is not very smart. And it doesn't look, she had to jump through hoops to make this make sense. I really, my brain cannot understand how she even begins to try and justify to herself how any of this makes sense. How any of it makes sense. It makes no sense to me. The men we have out here, deplorable, a hot mess. And all throughout the many different tribes and all throughout our cultures, there are all manner of rites of passage that boys go through and enter that journey into manhood. And I think the disservice that happens around these conversations is that we do not word things correctly. We call them men. We do not make them aware that you are starting your journey into manhood. Okay, if it's about manhood, you are still at the very beginning of this thing, right? But they come back from the mountain and they want, in my experience, in my area, not even just my tribe, but in my area at large, the different groups that make up the area and stuff, what we experience is the boys coming back because they're still boys. I don't give a shit. You're not still clothing a person. They're living in your home. It's still mommy this, it's still mommy that. And then you also turn around and say, oh, but he's a man now. Because then what characteristics do we assign men? What level of responsibility do we assign a man versus a boy coming into himself? If we're saying that you are patriarchy princess shit here, if we say now you are provider, protector, boy is not providing nor protecting. He's still suckling on his mom's tit, to be honest. So how does he get this title? How does this work? It's so absurd. This is where we need to leave the older women. We need to love and leave them right at this juncture. Okay, let's get into Iyanla. I'm going to play a little bit of that clip of the chat that she had with Eboni K. Williams, and then we can come back and have a chat about that. Right.
Would you date a bus driver? Would you date
if
a bus
he owns
driver?
the bus? If he owns
No.
it. If he owns the bus,
See, that's a problem. That's a problem. That's a problem.
Okay.
Because the standards and requisites, and I'm not talking about him laying on his sofa playing video games all day. I'm not talking about that. But the standards and the criteria that we use to measure men is off for who we are as women and who they are in this society. I would date a bus driver if he loved driving the bus, if he was a man of integrity, if he was good to his mama, if he treated me well, I would date a bus driver. But we think that it's another human being's responsibility to give us what we need instead of us building together. I can build with a bus driver. I'd have my little stash over on the side in my prenup, but I could build with a bus driver. So I think some of the criteria that we look for in the reality of today keeps us unhappy, keeps us angry, keeps us imbalance. And then when the men show up, we want to beat them up because they're not living up to our standards and criteria. And it's not working, beloved. It's just not working. So it's not that it's bad or wrong, it's obsolete. It's obsolete. We have to come up with a new way of being. I don't believe in carrying a man. A man has to do for himself.
Right. What rubbish? What rubbish? If he's passionate about driving the bus, who's passionate about driving a bus? This isn't to look down on blue collar workers, on hardworking men across the board, all across the world, right? Because this conversation has reached me, like over here in Limpopo, and I'm like, what is she encouraging exactly? Do you guys ever pick up on the fact that they have no what am I looking to say? They're always trying to get the black women to lower their standards because they've somehow made the calculation that the men won't elevate. So there's no conversation about that. There's no chat around what if he was working toward being the bus owner like Eboni needs him to be. Right? That's never the chat. The chat is always, you must make space for this. My favorite content creator on here, on YouTube, is Kimberly Nicole Foster. I've said this. I think I said every other video. And Kimberly comes under fire for, she's sharing a lot about her life lately, right? And she's shared with us over the last couple of years that she's fine dating a man that earns less than her, but she can't do a man that's not college educated because she keeps making the point, and we know it. So I don't know what like nonsense we keep trying to engage in. She keeps trying to like having to make the point that it's not so much about the money. These things get complicated, right? When you think of a college experience, you're thinking exposure. You're thinking there's a culture that happens when you are in college campus, around other college students on the campuses and stuff. And you develop rapport, you build network, you learn to communicate in you move different circles. You learn to navigate similar spaces. Those things build person. Those things determine how you're going to navigate the world, how you're going to engage with other people. When somebody doesn't share in like a lot of these experiences and you come from like very, very different worlds, it makes building a relationship very difficult. And so it becomes very reductive and really dishonest when we have these conversations and we reduce it to just money. And no, not just, because the money bit is important. Do not get me wrong. Very, very important. But when we reduce the entire conversation to money, that's crazy. We cannot have conversations of imposter syndrome over here and then have conversations of, oh, it's just money. Who's lying? Where are we lying? What are we lying about? Because we're lying somewhere, right? Either the money really is important or the imposter thing isn't real. When you date even out of your culture and just experiencing that shock from somebody's culture and how they do things, or you're dating somebody who's just they come from money and they've moved in these spaces over here socially, economically, their entire lives, you are a fish out of water when you enter into those spaces. So the constant trying to get Black women in particular, and this isn't just an American thing, we get told to give losers a chance too. Or your problem is that you won't just give a regular whatever. We have no chats. We have nothing to talk about. They call me a snob, right? They say what's that she said? we theorize everything and we try to, because they don't exist in the same spaces. They aren't interested in dissecting anything and trying to understand where things come from. I experience men in my life, people I consider my brothers, people who I'm really, really close to, who've been exposed to the same things as me, but because they, black men tend to think that they aren't like as affected adversely, especially by certain conditions as black women, so they tend to be dismissive, right? Things like colorism and things of that nature. But when you try to break down the concept of ugly, and this happened to me recently with a man in my life whom I love dearly, and somebody trended that botched lady who wears pink. She was pulled over by the traffic cops, and then she said why they're making her stand in the sun because like she's from Limpopo or something, when we know that, like, basically saying that people from Limpopo are dark and making dark a synonym for ugly, essentially. And when I was having a chat with this person, they're like, yeah, but like there are a lot of ugly people here. I'm in Limpopo. And I'm like, what do you mean by ugly? How do we get to ugly? Right? This person has the same or similar life, not experiences, because we don't experience life that way, but exposure in terms of school, in terms of social circles and stuff. But they've never had to apply themselves to these kinds of things, to trying to understand, because they don't feel the effect of it, or they don't think it affects them adversely. Now, if a person who's at the same exposure to me comes out half-baked as this person has, what more a person who ends up a bus driver and didn't have the same experiences, where I couldn't even begin to try and like explain a concept like colorism. So now I'm in a relationship where I'm teacher the entire time, because we come from such, who wants to do that labor? Who the fuck wants to be Miss Ma'am in the relationship? Who wants to be teacher? I have a question, right? Or when you're trying to explain where something comes from, they're like, right? Constantly being dismissive of the fact that you know something or that you can explain something, because they get mad, right? Like they grow resentful. That's the other thing they can't stand. I had a chat with my best friend yesterday about somebody I had a brief thing with maybe 4 or 5 years ago at this point. And I had a thing with this person for a couple of months. And we got to a point where we realized that they did not like me. Like, they actually hated the fact that I could express myself. But that Iyanla, or I'm not sure how we say this, wants women who have worked so hard to get into certain spaces to now go back home to having unfulfilling partnerships. Because what if he's kind, and I'll date a bus driver if he's passionate about driving the bus, and if he's kind, and I would like to be fulfilled. I would like to be in a partnership where we can have elevated conversations, where I feel like I'm learning something, where I feel like what I know is being taken seriously, where I feel like the literature or whatever that I prefer to engage with, how I choose to feed myself, these things are valued in here. Because let's say we decide that we want to have children. How do we raise these children when all he has to offer me is passion for bus driving and fucking kindness? What rubbish. We don't need to listen to these women. We don't need to be disrespectful about it, but we must just leave them alone, right? She and her peers can go date men who are passionate about whatever it is that they're fucking doing, and they have nothing to chat about. We've seen these relationships where a very smart woman dates down, and then we all are having to like make accommodations for her fucking bimbo boyfriend coming around, and now we can't have certain conversations. We keep having to change the subject so that he doesn't have to be othered. And then he's still mad and resentful and being made to feel small, or feeling like he's being made to feel small. And the woman is constantly, jumping through hoops. It's hurdle after hurdle and trying to make sure his ego isn't bruised at the fact that she's just so smart or she's done so well. What rubbish. What rubbish. Be alone, my babes. It's not worth it. It's never worth it. How's about the men fucking elevate? That's the chat. Anyway, that's that. Mwah, mwah. Bye, Ella.